Welcome back to episode 41 of Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports. Hook 'em horns, y'all. Welcome in. High atop Houston, Texas, Tuesday, January 9th, 9:17 p.m. Central Time. My name is Michael Wein. That is my co-host, Emmy Nixon, joining me most often on this side of our channel. Please like and subscribe. Share it with any fellow Longhorn fans that you may have, or any college sports fans in general. We've got a loaded show today. For those of you who tuned in to our national championship live stream last night, for a lot of it, we greatly appreciate that. We did have some fan interaction. That was really fun. That was our first live event of 2024. I'm sure Emmy enjoyed that as well. Congratulations to the Michigan Wolverines on closing out what I thought was a really, really, really good college football season, at least on the field. We got a couple new playoff teams this year in Texas and Washington that we don't usually see. We had seen Alabama before. We had seen Michigan before. We had seen Washington 7 or 8 years back, but we got Texas. We got Washington. It was a great year for Texas football. We'll be talking about it, but Emmy and I need to quickly transition from in-season mode to off-season mode, as it's going to look totally different than it has in years past here in the college football off-season. We've got college basketball right, I guess, at the start of conference play. In college baseball, Texas baseball is 38 days away. So here pretty soon, we're going to be talking Texas baseball too. So if you like college baseball, as we didn't really get to it as much last year as we wanted to, we'll be doing that this year. At least I will. And I'm sure Emmy will partake in some of those conversations as well. So this is your source for everything Texas, but it's also going to be your source for some things NFL draft, Texas news, whether that's coaching hires, transfer portal, NFL draft declarations, which we'll be talking about today, other NFL draft content, Texas basketball content, Texas football or Texas baseball content. Everything is here. So with all that being said, I'd like to welcome in my guest and co-host on the Raw Prospect Podcast main feed, Emmy Nixon. How are you tonight?
I'm good, man. Had a pretty mild day at work today. Pretty light when it comes to that. So feeling pretty fresh, ready to go, ready to talk some college hoops. It's been a while since we've gotten into that. So let's get into this.
Yeah, so we're going to start today's show with a segment we haven't done in a while, and that's buy or sell. So basically, I came up with these questions this afternoon before tonight's games, and you'll see why that matters here in a minute, or it could matter, may not matter for your answers to the question. But basically, it's just a statement that I came up with about college basketball, about teams and or players, and we throw it out there. If you buy it, that means you tend to agree with it. If you sell it, it means you disagree with it. And we've got, I believe it's 4 or 5 buy or sells. We may or may not do the final 4 exercise I wanted to do. We probably won't get to that today, but we're definitely going to get through these buy or sell questions. Are you ready, Emmy?
Yeah, let's do this.
Okay. Texas got a huge win tonight over a 12-2 Cincinnati team. It was their first time hosting a Big 12 basketball game in the conference. They hosted Texas, as you know. That got a big draw. It was loud. It was a hostile environment. The game was on ESPN Plus, so not everyone saw it because ESPN Plus has that whole Big 12 package. So all the Big 12 games that aren't on national TV get put onto there. I did watch some of the first half. I was driving home from work for most of the first half and getting dinner and all that stuff made. And I watched a lot of the second half, including the end, which the game ended with another Max Abmas buzzer beater. As you remember, earlier on in the season, Texas needed a Max Abmas buzzer beater. This one wasn't a buzzer beater, but the Louisville one was. This one was just like a go-ahead shot with 6 or 7 seconds left. from the baseline. I wrote this question before that game. Buy or sell? Based on what you know so far of this Texas team, Texas is a bubble team this year, and they will struggle to finish above 500 in conference play. Buy or sell?
Um,
They're 1-1 in conference right now. They lost the home game to Tech, and they beat Cincinnati.
I think I'm going to sell that. I still think this Texas team, while it may not be as consistent as last year's team in conference play, I do think they'll be above 500 and above water because I still think they're within the top half of the conference, to say the least, in terms of talent and overall ability night to night. When they're playing at their best, I think this team is as good as almost any team in the conference, I guess, minus maybe Houston and a couple others. Um, I still think there's room to improve here. It's early January still. I guess we're fast approaching mid January, but um, it's still early days when it comes to conference play. There's still a lot of basketball to be played. There's still a lot that to be decided, and I think the fate of this team ultimately will be decided by probably Dylan Dessou and two, whether you can get better point of attack defense from these guards.
I'm going to lean sell. I'm leaning sell after what I saw tonight. But here's what I will say. I'm definitely selling the part that they're going to be a bubble team. Because I just think there are too many great opportunities in conference play to build up your resume. I think being in a conference like the Big 12 really, really helps your chances of getting in the tournament. Just because night after night after night, not only do you have to bring your A, B plus game to win games, especially on the road in this conference, but you're going against most of the time. 75% of this league is a quad one victory, which boosts your NCAA tournament resume. And I just think Texas will win some of those games. They will lose some of those games. And I just think by the end of it, they will have enough quantity of quality by the end. And who knows, maybe they're one of those teams that peaks in late February going into the conference tournament, and they're able to make a run in the conference tournament like they have the past couple of years. And that boosts their seed line even higher. I'm not sure with their weak non-conference schedule and the two blowout losses to UConn and Marquette, how high of a seed they could get unless they do incredibly well in conference play. But I do think they're going to be far from a bubble team. I do think they will get an at-large bid to the tournament. We won't have to worry about will they be in, will they be out come Selection Sunday, because I just think there are too many opportunities. However, the second part of the question is more interesting. I'm not saying this Texas team is going to finish below 500 in conference, but could they struggle along the way to get above 500? Yes, I do think so. Because you add Houston, you add Cincinnati, BYU is a top 20 KenPom team. They're really good this year. Like UCF is a totally capable NCAA tournament quality basketball team. I know you don't have to go on the road. You don't have to go on the road to all the schools that you previously did, because you're playing some of these other schools and you're not doing a home and home like you did last year with the other 9 teams in the conference originally. But you don't get Kansas at home like you did last year. You're going to have to beat them at Fog Allen. And that's easier said than done, as we know. You got to play Houston twice. The stretch at the end of February for this Texas team is brutal. It's Baylor. It's Oklahoma, who's a top 12 team. It's Houston. And I'm forgetting the other team, BYU. That's like 4 top 20 teams consecutively. If Texas could split there, that would be absolutely fantastic. Uh, so I'm selling. I think after tonight, after what I saw from Dylan DeSue, Max Abmas is clutch. He's not always the most efficient player. He's not great defensively because his size is just not conducive to that environment, especially in the Big 12, where there are so many big athletic guards. Texas is going to be at a disadvantage there most nights, but with what he can do, his ability to score, his quickness in the break, they were able to beat Cincinnati without Caden Shedrick tonight. It actually allowed Dylan DeSue to be inserted back into the starting lineup and played his best game of the season. Remember, he missed 9 games recovering from a foot surgery that he had in the offseason. That foot injury that I guess knocked him out of the NCAA tournament last year. So if we get all conference caliber type play from Dylan DeSue, like we did tonight, if we can have that shot blocker, dirty work, rim protector, 10, 12 points a night guy in Caden Shedrick, and you can kind of stagger their minutes and you get some more production on a consistent basis from Tyrese Hunter, this could be a really good Texas team. And they could end up in that 5 to 7 seed range and be a dangerous team in the tournament. I do think they'll end up probably in the top half of the league because right now, it's sitting at 14 teams, and I just don't think they'll be in the bottom 7 of the league.
No.
But I mean, it's Houston, it's Baylor, it's Kansas State, Iowa State, who just beat Houston tonight. Like, there are no shortage of really, really Texas Tech, who just beat Texas once again. Like, it's just a stacked league once again, the best league in America, bar none. So that's all that really needs to be said there. I wanted to talk a little Texas basketball because it had been a while since we did that. And before tonight, to be honest with you, I was worried. I'm still a little worried just because of the schedule. But I don't think we've seen this Texas team play an A-plus game yet against a quality opponent. But like tonight wasn't an A-plus game. They won the game, but they were trailing with 25 seconds to go. So yeah, we'll see what happens there. My next question: buy or sell, based on what you know or what you've seen. Houston is the best team in the Big 12.
I think I would buy that right now. Yeah. I mean, their defense is incredible to say the least. I mean, I think they lead the country in transition defense, and it feels like every single high level scorer that comes to town is immediately you can shock them in for an off night. Like they just hound people. I mean, they have a formula that's been working for them for years, but I think this year in particular, they just have a lot of long length on the perimeter, and just they're always there in rotation. They're really locked in that aspect. It's been really, really good. It's been extremely impressive.
Yeah. Remember back a couple years ago when Virginia was at its peak and year after year after year, they had boasted the nation's most consistently efficient defense because Tony Bennett deploys the pack line defense and it's hard for teams to figure it out. It's really hard to attack the paint. And in order to beat Virginia, you have to be efficient from the perimeter. You got to make your shots beyond the arc because they don't give you a lot of second chance points. They're really sound defensively. They play defense without fouling, and you can't get easy buckets in the paint. Like, it's really hard to do that. The Cavs ranked 7th or higher in KenPom's adjusted defensive efficiency for 7 straight seasons, and mixed within those seasons, they had an Elite Eight run and a national championship. Now, they also lost to UMBC in that time period, but what was UMBC able to do in that game? They were able to figure out the pack line and knock down a bunch of perimeter shots. That's how Syracuse, back a couple years ago in that Elite Eight game, they knocked down a bunch of threes. Like, it's those types of teams that these teams struggle with. Well, now that that run's over, Houston has kind of taken Virginia's place as the premier defensive team in college basketball. There are other great defenses out there, don't get me wrong. I mean, we saw San Diego State last year, how elite they were defensively and how that translated to success in the tournament. Houston is just kind of a better San Diego State. Like, they're big, they're lengthy, they're athletic. They've got guards who can score, and their defense is at a historic all-time level right now. They're only allowing, coming into tonight, they were only allowing 49.1 points per game. When compared against the top 15 teams on KenPom, that's almost 20 points less than Kansas, who ranks second in adjusted defensive efficiency, points per game allowed. It's unbelievable what Kelvin Sampson has done there with that program. And I do think right now they are the best team in the Big 12. I have a couple questions about Kansas. We're not going to talk about them tonight, but I do have those. I think they need more off their bench. Their top four is great, but I think they need more off their bench. I have some questions about Baylor. And there are other good teams in the Big 12 that could beat Houston on any given night. Don't get me wrong. But right now, I think Houston's the most well-rounded of them. Okay, next question. So we don't get too carried away. Buy or sell? This is kind of a multi-pronged question. So if you need me to repeat it, let me know.
Okay.
Kentucky and Auburn are very, very dangerous. But for your money, if you were betting, you would take Tennessee to win the SEC.
Over Kentucky and Auburn?
Yeah. Or anyone in that conference.
I think I would still ride with Kentucky, to be honest. I think Kentucky is one of those teams that year over year, I guess maybe not so much the last couple, but the track record of John Calipari has been with these young freshman-laden teams, they're going to get hot in late February and March. That's what they typically do. And they've laid the groundwork this year to where they've played good basketball throughout. And I think there's still that extra level to reach. And I think they'll be doing that. I think they're still going to do that. And by the time the SEC tournament comes around and the regular season champ is decided, I think it's going to be Kentucky.
Fair enough. I think it could be either of those two teams. I think Auburn's really, really good. Yeah. And not quite to the extent, not near the extent of, say, a John Calipari, but Bruce Pearl's a really damn good coach. He's made a Final Four before, and he's got a very talented team this year. They had kind of an off year last year at Auburn. They're back this year. And I love Kentucky. I think they could very much well win this conference. As I said yesterday in our live stream when we talked a little college basketball, they've got freshmen, but it's different than years past. These freshmen aren't playing like freshmen. They're playing like they've been here, done that before, and they've just got depth. Like they might be the most deep, most athletic, talented team, top to bottom in the country. But we're not talking about the NCAA tournament. That's, I guess, 2 months down the road. I actually am going to buy this. I do think Tennessee will win the regular season. Um, and here's why. I think early on, Zakai Ziegler coming back from that ACL really struggled to find his. Like he wasn't a healthy version of Zakai Ziegler. I think he's found his comfortability after non-conference. In the past couple games, past 5 to 6 games, he's been really, really good. And if they get that level of production from their point guard and Zakai Ziegler, Tennessee can beat anyone in the country because of their defense. Their defense, as always, has been top 15 in the country. In fact, I think, let me look real fast. I think they're actually they're fifth right now in adjusted defensive efficiency according to KenPom. They're behind Houston, Kansas, BYU, Marquette, and then it's Tennessee. But Auburn's right there. Kentucky isn't quite at that level defensively, but they're at a whole nother level offensively. But yeah, I mean, I think with Zakai Ziegler finding it, he's averaging over 20 points per game in his last 7 games. And with their defense, with the transfer that they added from Colorado, Dalton Knecht, who's a shooter, a floor spacer, can also attack the basket and create his own, along with Josiah Jordan James, who's a lengthy, big body who can play the 3 or the 4, has some defensive versatility. I think I'm so excited when we get that Tennessee-Kentucky matchup because it'll be a matchup of athleticism and quickness and fast-paced basketball with this Tennessee team that if they're able to get up into Kentucky and force them into tough shots, it's just going to be a battle of styles, and we'll see what happens. I think any of these teams could end up winning the conference and making the Final Four. But right now I'd bet Kentucky, but it has to be because of Zakai Ziegler in the point guard play. Because
and to your point as well, it's also going to be him taking care of the ball as well. Because if it becomes, if Tennessee is able to get out and run and not have to create in half court offensive situations, then that puts Kentucky basically with a hand behind their back at that point.
Right. Right now in the SEC, not to get too deep into the weeds, I would go Tennessee, Kentucky, Auburn. It's my top 3, and then Alabama's right there at the top of tier 2. One of the things we'll have to talk about down the road is the struggles of Arkansas. Arkansas has been a team that's been a staple in the second weekend of the NCAA tournament for the past 3 years under Eric Musselman. They're really struggling right now. They just got blown off the court by Auburn in their own building.
Yeah, I just saw that. I just saw the score of that game the other day, and I was like, "Whoa!"
And usually that doesn't happen to Eric Musselman coach teams, especially playing at home. Maybe that's more of a testament to what Auburn is this year. But Arkansas has been struggling. We'll talk about them down the road. Okay, last buy or sell for today. I talked about this last night as well. Buy or sell with their big road win over Clemson this past weekend on the road. North Carolina this year, after missing the tournament last year, is the best team in the ACC. And they're bona fide national championship contenders.
I buy. I think it all really comes back to Armando Bacot to me, and how he can dominate the paint. I went back and watched that Clemson game, and his stat line in terms of scoring wasn't, it didn't really jump off the page, but he took PJ Hall out of the game and took his scoring out of the game, forced him to end up fouling out in about 25 minutes of play, I think it was. And when Baycott is aggressive like that and really making his presence felt on the defensive end, North Carolina is going to be a really hard out again in any situation, because I find it hard to even see a scenario where in the first few rounds of the tournament there's a better, front court rim protector than Armando Baycott,
Yeah,
or just paint protector in general.
he was excellent in that Clemson game. He went for 14 points and 16 boards. He held PJ Hall, as you mentioned, to a season low 10 points. In fact, PJ Hall really struggled in that game. He actually fouled out after 24 minutes.
It's close.
4 of those 5 fouls were drawn by a much more aggressive Baycott than we've seen so far this year. Baycott's scoring is down this year. He has just one 20-plus point game over the last 11 games, and his usage rate is at its lowest since the 2020-2021 season. But I think we're going to get more of this Armando Baycott in conference play, because I do not think, other than maybe at Kyle Filipkowski, or I'm trying to even think of bigs in the ACC that match up really well with Armando Baycott. I think he will be an all ACC first team caliber type guy in conference play. And I think with the efficiency and the high level microwave scoring and shot creation of RJ Davis, with the transfers that they brought in, Cormac Ryan, the transfer from Notre Dame, and Harrison Ingram, the experienced transfer from Stanford, those guys give them defensive versatility, but they also give them perimeter shooting that they didn't have at all times last year. They're efficient. Cormac Ryan can create some of his own shot. He's good moving without the ball. And if you have that guard big combo that can be dominant in any given game, you're set up to be one of the better teams in college basketball. Right now, North Carolina is top 10 on KenPom. They've got wins over Tennessee, who I just raved about, Florida State, Oklahoma, who's a top 12 team, and Clemson, who's a top 20 caliber team. Their only losses were an overtime loss to Villanova, a neutral site loss to UConn, who's a top 10 team, and a neutral site loss to Kentucky, who is a you could argue a top 5 team in America. So I really believe in this North Carolina team. Other than Clemson, Duke, Miami, maybe an NC State and or Virginia, I'm not sure how much depth there is in the ACC this year. So I will say that they are the best team in the ACC. And I could see them getting 13 or 14 wins in conference play. I think they're that good. You look at their metrics, they're 10th in offensive efficiency, but they're 16th in defensive efficiency. They are more bought in and more cohesive on the defensive end this year than in years past. And that's really important because in years past, it's been run and gun style play, have to score more points than the other team. If you have an off shooting night, you're going to lose because you can't get stops on the defensive end. Well, this year, it's a little bit different than that. Not saying that there are going to be some elite defense throughout the entire season, but it's definitely better than what it's been in years past, and that's big for Carolina fans. Right now, I'm curious to see where they rank in 3-point shooting. They're 50. They're 55th, so they're still in the top quarter of teams of major conference teams, but uh, you'd like to see that number improve a little bit. But their efficiency metrics are great, and they have the personnel this year to be good on both ends of the floor. And this is a big year for them because they had that up and down season a couple years back where they got hot in February, made the run to the Final Four, almost won the national championship, beat Duke in Coach K's last game, as you guys remember. And then last year they came in as preseason number 1 with Caleb Love, with RJ Davis, with a lot of these same guys, with Armando Bacot, and it just totally fell apart in Hubert Davis's second year as head coach. Then or in his first, yeah, then they, kind of rebounded this season. So good for them. That's going to wrap up our college basketball conversation for tonight. And let's quickly transition to Texas football talk. Do you want to start with the transfer portal stuff, or do you want to start with this coaching hire?
Um, Let's start with transfer portal. There's been a lot of news going around for the last week or so that we haven't touched on. So
Yeah, absolutely. I want to start with this. I want to start with some of the guys real fast that Texas is taking a look at right now in the portal. So first of all, we know they have Andrew Makuba from Clemson. They got Trey Moore, the highly touted UTSA edge, who comes in with 2 years left of eligibility. And they got Matthew Golden, the receiver from Houston. They're still targeting guys in the portal. I think they still want another wide receiver. I think they want a tight end.
yep.
I know they want a defensive tackle or 2, but I know they want at least 1. They might even want a linebacker, and I think they do want another defensive back. Ryan Watts entered the draft. They've had some departures in the defensive backfield, probably for better or for worse. As Jaron Thompson went into the portal, Keaton Crawford went into the portal. There have been some departures in that area. Obviously, we know Jalen Catalon entered the portal. So I could definitely see here in the next month or two, Texas taking 4 or 5 more transfers in. They already have 3 committed. I could see 4 or 5 more. But remember, Texas is different from a lot of these other programs. They're going for quality over quantity. They're looking for immediate impact guys. They're not like A&M. They're not just going out and getting guys for depth right now to replenish the bottom end of their roster. They're looking. Texas is in a totally different position. They're going for guys that they either think can start or will play a huge role on next year's team, and that's what they've gotten so far. So let's talk about the wide receiver position, because right now I think it's the position that's hottest on the docket in their portal search. Over the weekend, they hosted Liberty wide receiver CJ Daniels on an official visit. He had visited Auburn a couple of days prior. Remember, Hugh Freeze used to be the head coach at Liberty, and he's now at Auburn. And so there are connections there with CJ Daniels and Hugh Freeze. So watch out for Auburn in this race as well. But he's 6'2". He's a bigger receiver than Matthew Golden. High production kid, 55 catches, over 1,000 yards, 10 touchdowns in 14 games for a team that played in a major bowl game against Oregon. Now They got blown out in that bowl game. Nobody expected them to win that bowl game, but they were there. Like they were probably the best group of 5 team in the country. You could make the argument. And CJ Daniels was a big reason why. Um, the Longhorns, I think, have a good chance here. I think, getting him on campus is a big deal. This is a guy that averaged nearly 20 yards a catch this season. He can take the top off of defense, and he'd give this receiver unit another proven commodity. We know there's a bunch of young, really talented guys in this receiving room. We're expecting Jonte Cook to take that next step next year. We think Ryan Wingo could potentially play some kind of role. But they get Matthew Golden. He's kind of more in the Xavier Worthy mold, more so than the A.D. Mitchell mold. And I think C.J. Daniels, while he's not an A.D. Mitchell, he could play that type of role on next year's team to a lesser extent, and help in replacing some of the production left by the departures of A.D. Mitchell and Jatavion Sanders. Your thoughts on CJ Daniels?
Well, I haven't seen him play. If I'm being entirely honest, I think it's more so the experience, and I mean he's productive. I mean the big thing for me is for the wide receiver position in particular. I think that's a position where you'd want to lock in your transfers early, like so sooner rather than later, just so you can get them in the building and get them building chemistry with Quinn, with Arch right away, and get that timing down and all that type of stuff. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of time for that in training camp, but it's really the sooner the better, in my opinion, because you can never have enough of that.
Right. That's not the it's not the only receiver though that Texas is taking a look at. Not the only receiver they are kicking the tires on. They brought him in for a visit. There hasn't been a lot of noise since that visit. Daniels might take other visits and still commit to Texas. He might commit to Auburn. We don't really know. I read a source earlier that said right now he's probably 60% confident that the Longhorns end up landing Daniels. But we're not entirely sure of that yet. Maybe Daniels is just waiting on Quinn Ewers to officially announce he's coming back, as that hasn't happened yet. But remember, Ewers has until the 15th to announce that. And he was on a hunting trip this weekend, so he's not necessarily probably thinking about announcing his decision during that time. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. I think it's a formality before that happens, or that's going to happen. But from what I have heard, there are 2 other names to know here. USC's wide receiver Dorian Singer is a name that has been mentioned in conversations with Texas. This time last year, Singer was viewed as one of the top wide receivers available in the portal, as he earned first-team All Pac-12 honors at Arizona the season before. And he's done it before at a high level. 66 catches, 1,100 yards, and 6 touchdowns. But things didn't really work out this year at USC for whatever reasons. We know USC had their fair share of issues this year, but he only caught 23 passes for 276 yards and 3 touchdowns this year. Still a highly productive college wide receiver, and I know Texas has some interest here, but I'm not sure he's the number 1 or even the number 2 guy on their radar right now. He's probably more so the backup plan, more so than anything.
Right.
And then there's another guy from Oregon State. His name is Silas Bolden. Can you imagine if Texas had Bolden and Golden in their receiving room? I encourage you
I'm a
to
big fan.
watch. Go look up highlights of Silas Bolden at Oregon State. He's really fast. He's faster than Matthew Golden. He's kind of that's in that smaller slot mold of a wide receiver, 5'7", 5'8", but really, really fast. Takes the top off a defense, super explosive, really shifty, productive guy at Oregon State. He was one of their better players. And I can just already know what would happen or I can imagine
Sark gets his hands on this guy. Yeah.
what would happen if not only Sark gets his hands on this guy, but also uh, the sayings that would come out of Matthew Golden and Silas Bolden at the wide receiver position. It'd just be kind of funny. So that's the wide receiver position. They're going to get another wide receiver. We know that. Um, there is kind of a sense of urgency here uh, with these guys to make decisions here over the next week because, especially if you're coming to Texas, this might not apply to every single school out there, but the spring semester is starting here in a couple of days, like in the next week or so, and there's a hard deadline cutoff to be able to enroll in classes at the University of Texas. And so these guys are going to, if they want to be early enrollees and participate in spring football, they're going to have to make their decisions here over the next week so that they can get enrolled in the school, enroll in their classes, so that they can be eligible to play on the football team uh, and participate in spring practice. Because as we know, especially with these freshmen, you want to be an early enrollee under Steve Sarkisian because it gives you a better chance to play early on.
Right.
Those extra reps, those extra 15 practices that you get are extremely valuable. And I think we saw that with some of the freshmen this year. Anthony Hill, a prime example. Um, Malik Muhammad, another example.
Was Derek Williams early enrollee?
He was a summer enrollee.
Okay. Yes.
So he was there for fall workouts. He was there for training camp, but he was not there for spring ball. But yeah, I mean, he was a very highly rated player, and I mean, it can work out both ways. But
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah.
that's that. Okay. It greatly benefits you to be an early enrollee, especially as a younger guy. But maybe it doesn't matter as much for these proven portal transfers. I'm not entirely sure. The big name right now, though, in the portal for Texas is Houston defensive tackle Jamari Caldwell. I'm not sure if you've heard him yet or heard him mentioned, but right now, according to multiple sites within the industry, he is the best defensive tackle in the portal available, and Texas needs a defensive tackle. Trill Carter entered the transfer portal. Obviously, they lose Byron Murphy and Tavondre Sweat. They get Alfred Collins back, which is big as a fifth-year senior, but they're looking for another starter that they can pair with Alfred Collins, as they're not really sure that Vernon Broughton or Aaron Bryant or Sadir Mitchell, who was in the 23 class, are quite ready to step in to that starting role next to Alfred Collins. And Jamari Caldwell, who's already visited Texas over the weekend, is trending to Texas right now. I think Texas is the easy leader for Caldwell. Oregon is also taking a look at him, but he was a disruptor for Houston this year. Get this, Caldwell, nobody in the Big 12, in league play, so in conference play, in the Big 12, regardless of position, had more sacks than Jamari Caldwell did from his defensive tackle position, with 6.5 sacks in conference play. He had 8.5 total on the season, but he missed 3 games. He was tied for second with about 3/4 of a sack per game in Big 12 games. Um, he had 10 and a half tackles for loss. He blocked a field goal in their win at Baylor on November 4th. And he's kind of more so in the mold of, he kind of reminds me a little bit of Byron Murphy. He's kind of more of a shorter, more like squatty,
Okay.
but
Yeah,
but
like
but
leverage.
but built defensive lineman, super athletic. He's really quick. Um, he probably could put on some weight, just a tad bit more weight, but he's, I think, 6'1", 325, really fast, super athletic, can get in the backfield. He's a disruptor. I think Texas, if they do land Jamari Caldwell, would be really well set up with a tandem of Alfred Collins and Jamari Caldwell. It wouldn't be Sweat and Murphy, but it'd be about as good as they could hope for.
Yeah,
To
I
go in there.
I think that would fit Texas well because they want those guys that can just get in the backfield and cause chaos.
Yeah,
With the style of linebacker they have, the more the defensive lineman can get in the backfield and keep the running back from just going downhill, the better
yeah,
because then the linebackers can just read it out.
exactly. I think Caldwell would be. I don't know if he'd be the biggest get in this portal cycle for Texas, but he'd be one of the biggest for sure. Um, he's really, really good. I got to watch some of his highlights. You go rewatch that Houston Texas game. And Jamari Caldwell was involved in that game. He had 2 sacks on Quinn Ewers in that game, and a couple tackles for loss as well. He kind of handled Jake Majors and DJ Campbell in that game uh, pretty handily. So, um, yeah, he would be a very good defensive tackle get uh, for Texas. And he was a guy that was just ranked behind Walter Nolan, the defensive tackle for A&M that entered the portal and committed to Ole Miss. He was the best guy there, but Jamari Caldwell was the next best thing in there at the defensive tackle position. Granted, it's really hard to find really, really good, solid starting level defensive tackles in the portal. Like, these guys don't grow on trees nowadays. It's really easy to find quarterbacks. It's easier to find receivers. It's easier to find skill position players. It's harder to find really, really damn good offensive linemen and defensive linemen in the portal. Uh, Texas is lucky that they were able to find a guy like Trey Moore. Like, that doesn't happen every year.
Yeah.
So, and that's why it's important that they're recruiting the way they are from the high school ranks on the offensive and defensive lines, because you can't just go out into the portal and build an entire offensive line like Colorado tried to do last year. That's not how it works. And so, I mean, you can try it, but it's probably not going to work, as we saw at Colorado last year.
Yeah.
And we've seen other places as well. Okay. We have about 5 or 10 more minutes here left on the show. That's the main stuff going on in the portal. To sum it up, I think they're going to get Jamari Caldwell. I think that decision probably comes down by the end of this week, if not here in the next week or so. And I do think they're going to get one of those 3 wide receivers that I mentioned. My guess is it would be CJ Daniels, but Silas Bolden is scheduled to take a visit to Texas this upcoming weekend. So I think it'll be one of those 2 guys. I personally prefer CJ Daniels because of his size, but I wouldn't mind a guy like Silas Bolden. Personally, I like both, but I don't know if Texas is going to take both. But we'll see what happens there. And then Texas will probably find a tight end. There are a couple tight ends in the portal that they're kicking the tires on. And then they they're bringing in one other note on the portal before we talk about some of these NFL draft declarations that have happened since Texas's season ended last Monday night against Washington. Is gosh, it just escaped my mind. What the hell was I going to say? Oh, Texas is bringing in a linebacker from Alabama this weekend who just entered the portal. He's from Duncanville High School.
Ooh.
So that's the connection. Same high school as same high school as Colin Simmons, same high school as a lot of these elite guys that Texas and other schools have found. Same school as Alex January, the defensive lineman in this 24 class. He's played 2 years at Alabama. I don't know much about him. I think it's Carry-On Blackshire, something along those lines. I need to get his name. I don't have it off the top of my head, but he could be linebacker depth. I think they are looking for another linebacker as Jalen Ford has departed. David Benda is coming back. He was a solid rotational guy for Texas this year. He didn't really have much on the NFL draft stock end, so he's coming back for another year. Maybe he can elevate his draft stock next year. They're going to have Anthony Hill. This would be more of a depth piece, probably, more so than anything. But it would be a good get. Any guy that you can take from Alabama to build up that linebacker depth would be good. So that's the last note on that. And then we can kind of wrap up the show. We're still waiting on Quinn Ewers' decision, but right now, here's the list of guys that have declared for the draft, as we kind of expected. Adonai Mitchell declared today officially. He wrote an article in the Players Tribune that I encourage everyone to read. Maybe I'll retweet it on our Raw Prospect Podcast Twitter account or my Twitter account, and you can go read that. Xavier Worthy declared literally the day after the game. Jonathan Brooks declared a couple days ago. The running back who had a fantastic season before tearing his ACL. Jatavion Sanders was a guy that, according to sources, was 50-50 at one point on whether or not to come back. Sark made a really compelling case on why he should return. There was an NIL package there for him if he wanted it, but at the end of the day, I think Sanders just kind of viewed it as, look, I'm already the number 2 tight end in this upcoming draft. I'm a borderline first round, early second round type guy. It's not a great tight end class in this upcoming draft. How much can I really improve my stock next season at Texas? Like, it's not going to get probably much better than this. I could probably maybe move myself up 10 picks, but I mean, let me just go make my money now is, I think, what it all came down to for Jatavion Sanders. So he declares for the draft. And then defensively, Ryan Watts declares. I think he's more of a day 3 pick. Jalen Ford declares. And then Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy also declare. Am I missing anybody? I do not believe so.
I guess Jordan Whittington technically, but we all expected that, obviously.
Yeah, Jordan Whittington. So basically, I mean, it's kind of all the guys that we talked about during the year. So, look, I mean, I think the message is it sucks to lose a lot of these highly productive, really, really good players from a really great Texas team. But this is what Georgia deals with every single year. This is what Alabama deals with every single year.
If you're a top team, this is part of the deal.
This is what Ohio State deals with. This is what, to maybe a lesser extent, but Michigan deals with. This is what the elite programs in college football deal with. This is what Washington is going to also find themselves dealing with
Yep.
this upcoming offseason. So Texas has been preparing for this with the way that they're recruiting and now developing guys. And so that's my message to Texas fans. Like, yes, it stinks. And there's no guarantee that Texas is as good as they were this year, next year, because a lot of the fat has been trimmed off from those Tom Herman rosters. I think it's basically at this point all trimmed off at this point, and it's all Sark's guys now, transfers and or young guys. A majority of this roster is Sark guys. Like, this is his team now, officially going into the SEC, and I think that's what he wanted. So we'll talk more about that in an upcoming Dit Hole. We'll talk more about the portal. I think by the next time we record a Dit Hole, we might have another transfer portal commitment to talk about or two. And we'll have some other stuff. Maybe we can start some NFL draft conversations. Can start talking about maybe these guys' draft stock, the Texas guys in particular, where we think they would fit, what teams would they fit the best with, that kind of conversation. We can have that with the Texas guys who have declared for the draft, something along those lines. I have some other fun ideas that I won't throw out right now for deep in the heart of Longhorn sports. The last thing I wanted to say before we get out of here and get over to our NFL content for the night is I'm going to try in my free time to kind of do a mini recruiting project to kind of help Emmy and others get more into recruiting. I'll announce the details on that at a later date, but as we get into February, March, April, as the 25 cycle starts to really heat up, that will become more of a prominent discussion here on this channel. And so thank you guys for tuning in. We're going to be back here next 15 to 20 minutes for NFC wildcard preview. So tune into that. We've got breakdowns of each game. We've got predictions. We've got best bets. And some other conversations will probably be mixed in between. These are our favorite episodes, some of our favorite episodes every year. So make sure you tune into that. Hopefully we'll have another Dit Hole by this weekend or early next week. But until then, peace out and hook 'em horns.
Peace out.